Something has happened over the last day or two that people really shouldn't gloss over. The Pentagon has confirmed that active duty U.S. military troops are being prepared for possible deployment to Minnesota in response to, protests that are connected to immigration enforcement. Now, that's not the National Guard being requested by a governor, it's the actual U.S. military. Now, to be clear, troops have not yet been deployed, but that's not the point. The whole point is that the president publicly floated using the Insurrection Act, which allows the federal government to send troops into states for domestic law enforcement under extreme circumstances. That power exists for situations where a state has completely collapsed, not for protests, not for dissent, not because federal actions are unpopular. So when that option is even put on the table, guys, people should pause because this isn't about whether you agree with the protesters or not. It's about whether protests themselves should be reframed as something that might justify military action. That's a line democracies are supposed to treat as sacred. So the reason this matters, especially if you're on the fence, is because, like I said, authoritarianism doesn't just announce itself. It starts with language, with hypotheticals, with leaders asking, what if we had to? And what if this situation's different this time? And every time the public shrugs and says, well, maybe, that line moves quietly. The most important thing here isn't that troops were sent yet, it's that escalation is being treated as a reasonable option in the language of leadership. Peaceful protest is being discussed in the same breath as a military response. Civil unrest is being framed as something that might actually require force instead of restraint or accountability. And once military solutions become thinkable for civilian problems, it gets a lot harder to undo that shift. So the real question isn't whether that crosses the line today, it's this. What happens to a democracy when the idea of using the military against its own people stops sounding unthinkable? I really think that that's a really important question that everybody should be paying attention to and thinking about.